Hey everybody, I want to talk a little bit about Lucy with Scarlett Johansson. I recently saw this film and I'm always excited when a new sci-fi movie comes out that's got an interesting twist, and it seemed like this would have some good action. Just looking at the trailers and some of the TV spots, it seemed exciting and it seemed like there'd be some good sort of hand-to-hand combat, and it had a good sort of premise to it. What happens if we can unlock the full power of our brain? So I was hopeful that it would improve on a similar movie that I remember, Ultraviolet, with Mila Jovovich, which had impressive visuals but was definitely lacking in the story department. So interesting connection there. I didn't know at the time that this Lucy was directed by Luc Besson, the same director who did The Fifth Element, naturally, and the music is Eric Serra, the same composer who did Fifth Element as well. I'm watching the movie, and as it begins, there's all those different shots of, a deer, a monkey, a piece of cheese, a leopard, and there's interesting juxtapositions of hunter and prey. And I'm saying to myself, this is awfully flashy for a Hollywood movie. It's kind of art cinema. I said, who's this director? Because I had actually no idea at the time, so I wasn't surprised to see that it was Luc Besson. So the plot described by one reviewer as Limitless meets Akira, less than the sum of its parts, and Limitless was shit. So that does, in some ways, sum up my thoughts about the movie. It was a little silly. The brain thing, it's not based on hard science. And, the director acknowledges this, saying that the 10% of your brain sort of myth, urban legend, it's been largely disproven. Because we do use all the parts of our brain just at different times. Think about if any area of your brain is damaged, there's, sometimes catastrophic effects. So it's not like there's a huge chunk of it, much less 90%, that could be taken away and not affect you. So he did say that it was an interesting premise if we take that as fact to do a piece of science fiction. I would call it just fiction because it's not based on science. It's more fantasy. If you look at the movie as fantasy, it did hold up. If you do a leap of faith, or if you're able to suspend your disbelief, then it does work on that level. But you have Morgan Freeman as a professor hammering in the science behind this at all times. We'll get to Morgan Freeman in a little bit. So when he says something, though, when Morgan Freeman speaks, you definitely think that whatever he's saying must be true. He just has that kind of gravitas about him. So, though mysteries regarding brain function remain, memory and consciousness, the physiology of brain mapping suggests that all areas of the brain have a function. So you need to kind of get past that and suspend your disbelief to enjoy the film, I think. Taking the pseudoscience apart, can you enjoy this as a popcorn movie? How does it hold up if you're just looking at it as a popcorn movie? The main character is a Neo, is a Dr. Manhattan, someone with infinite power that sometimes it's difficult to make a connection or to enjoy. So when Lucy gets to the part later on where she has that French detective with her, she keeps him around as a reminder of what it is to be human. And I really enjoyed that character, and I enjoyed that aspect of her personality. So she has no weaknesses, and she doesn't even care that the cops are getting slaughtered in the lobby, because she's just so far beyond that at that point. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. Let's start at the beginning. She does seem believable, except for the fact that she puts a straw in her hot cup from Starbucks. No one puts a straw in a hot cup. If you do it, stop it. You don't put a straw in a hot cup. Take the lid off if you need to, if you don't like that spout, but we don't put straws in hot cups. It's like putting ketchup on a hot dog. We don't do it. She was definitely believable as someone who's kind of getting pressured by her boyfriend to just bring this briefcase right in. And he's saying, she's saying, I don't want to do it, I don't feel comfortable, and he handcuffs it to her, which I thought was a real scumbag move. But he does get what's coming to him, doesn't he? So she goes in and ends up meeting Mr. Chang, who's covered in blood. So he's pretty terrifying, and he washes up with bottled water, which I thought was a good image. So he calls the translator on the phone, and he's very impatient, and the translator is explaining to her what's going to happen. The briefcase that she brought they want her to open it, and they go behind the blast shield, assuming that maybe she's an assassin and it's a bomb, but it turns out that it's 4 pouches of this purple powder. We cut to Morgan Freeman, and they talk, what have we done with 10% of our brain? Imagine, you know what you know today, imagine what you'll know tomorrow. And they use as an example the fact that with, I think it was 15 or 20% of their brain, dolphins are able to develop sort of sonar and like echolocation, implying strongly that if we were able to unlock more of our brains, we could have powers like that as well. And this sonar echolocation, this is not science fiction, this is fact. So could we as humans develop something like that? That's what the movie is implying, that the more of our brain we open up, the more we can do. And right there, that I think that example of what dolphins can do is interesting because it's a factual building block that allows them to sort of extrapolate and interpolate what would happen between 10 and 100%. Some of the things that happen towards the end with the levitation and controlling magnetic fields, things like that, I don't think are possible because you're affecting the environment around you with these forces. So I don't think specifically that the brain can unlock, the ability to control magnets with your hands. But that's what the film is implying. So you need to kind of get beyond that a little bit to enjoy it. So the purpose of life is gaining time, and you need to either be immortal or reproduce. And of course, we as humans, we can't achieve immortality, so we reproduce and we have children and we pass on our knowledge to the next generation. And I enjoyed this part of Morgan Freeman's lecture, if you will. I wonder if you were to edit it together as one continuous take, his lecture that they keep intercutting, if it would hold up. There's a great disgusting montage of animal births, which I didn't enjoy, and I'm glad that they didn't go to a human one. I kind of had one eye open, afraid that I didn't know what they were going to show next. But she is basically put with a group of other sort of drug mules, and I didn't realize at first that they were being treated as drug mules by Chang. And they've got the pouches sewn up in their stomachs, so they're going to send them with plane tickets to different locations and then retrieve the drugs on the other end. The other 3 actually go through with it, and they keep Lucy behind. And there's the allusion to the fact that these thugs are going to sexually assault her, and she's starting to feel sort of a change happening because they beat her up, and as they're punching her and kicking her in the stomach, the bag opens up and it goes into her system, and she starts to feel different. She starts to feel these powers. 20%. Which is now the same as the dolphins. At 20% will we have control of our own body, and at 40% will we have control of others and control of matter around us. That's just a hypothesis, but it's interesting. And a student asks Morgan Freeman, what would happen at 100%? He says, I have no idea. So why was she not put on the plane right away? I know that the thugs were sort of waiting. Maybe her flight was later in the day, but she kills everyone and she escapes. No one notices her gun as she walks into the hospital. So she goes to the hospital. She needs a surgeon to check her out, and no one notices this woman walking down the hallways with a gun. The surgeon starts operating on her, and he's trying to get the bag out, and she explains that it's this stuff. I think they call it CPH4. And she calls her mom, and she's trying to explain to her that she's seeing everything and she's feeling everything. It reminded me sort of Highlander, what Ramirez says to Highlander at the end of the first movie. Connor says, I feel everything, I know everything, and she claims to be able to feel the pain of her bones growing as a child, and she can taste her mother's milk, and she's remembering these things that no one should be able to remember. Which makes you think, are these memories locked up here somewhere and we just can't access them, or were they not created? The film seems to highly imply the former. Right, so she goes back to Chang after she leaves the surgeon and, enacts her revenge. She kills all his guards, but she leaves him alive. There's a great scene where he's getting some sort of a massage, and she kind of stabs his hands into the chair. And I'm not sure why she let him live. If she killed him, there'd be no main antagonist sort of to drive the plot forward. But I think that's something of a plot hole. she killed the guy on the operating table because he was going to die anyway. So clearly she's at a point, even at, I think at this point she's at 20%, that she doesn't value human life the way the rest of us do. Even already, she's making these decisions, these cold decisions. So why leave him alive? I thought that was a little bit of a plot hole. She should have killed Chang right there. So she looks up, Morgan Freeman in Paris. He was Professor Norman, I think, but I'm just going to keep calling him Morgan Freeman if that's all right with you. She looks him up, and a good scene there where she sort of takes over his TV, takes over his phone, takes over his computer, so she's being able to manipulate magnetic waves at this point. So she feels no pain anymore, but she remembers it, which I thought was interesting. So she gets on a plane to go see him, and she changes her hair color in the airport, just like Mila Jovovich in Ultraviolet. She was able to change her hair color at will. 30%. So she gives the detective all the info on the drugs and the other 3 mules. The detective in Paris, who was a great character, gets the other 3, and they're going to do the surgery to get the bags of drugs out of them. So her nose starts to bleed on the plane, and she starts sort of disintegrating on the plane, 40%. And her cells are apparently choosing immortality. I didn't quite follow that, the whole immortality versus reproduction thing. But her cells are choosing immortality, and she's starting to change, and she's disintegrating. So she gets more of the compound, and that saves her momentarily. But now we know that she needs more of that compound over and over. She needs more injections of it in order to even just stay alive, at this point anyway. So she takes more of the drugs, and her eyes change color as she blinks, and her eyes are changing every time she blinks. 50%. So she can see every cell signal and read it. This was a great scene. She's in the car with the French detective, and they're driving. And he says, "I'd rather." I forget the exact quote, but he says he doesn't want to die because she's driving so recklessly. And she says, "We never really die." 60%. I thought it was very interesting, the scene when she's in the car with the detective, and she can see every phone, she can see the signal, and she can use her mind to reach out and read it, hear the conversation, or read the text message. And I'm sure that would extend even to Wi-Fi. She could probably see Wi-Fi networks and see the data that's going back, intercept pictures, messages, things like that. So she's able to now start creating force fields and magnetic fields. They go to the sort of the facility of the hospital where the other 3 mules are being held. Chang's men show up to try to get the drugs back, and she's able to hold them in midair, just sort of with a thought, and they're dangling in midair, which was a really cool scene. She gets the cases, so now she has all the drugs, and she wants to keep the cop as a reminder. Why does she even need him? She wants to remember sort of humanity to help keep her grounded as she's advancing. So she gets to the university, and they talk about how time is unity and mankind is driven by power and profit, but ignorance brings chaos, not knowledge. Sort of like when aliens have technology. If aliens were to show up with this amazing technology, the Earth would go to war over it. But it's being suggested that ignorance brings chaos, not knowledge, so that knowledge would actually be power, and it would be a stabilizing force for our planet. So as she approaches 70%, I'm asking myself, why can't she just stop the mob with her thought and save lives? Because there's this shootout in the university hallway. And you've got to ask yourself, she could stop that and save the cops' lives, but she's so far beyond it now. It's not even a concern to her anymore. And there's a shot of the statue outside sort of being destroyed, sort of knowledge crashing down, which I thought was an interesting symbol of sort of what we as humans sometimes do with knowledge. 80%. So she's sitting in this chair, and she's trying to make a new generation computer because she knows she doesn't have much time left, and she wants to take this knowledge, and her cells can't be immortal. They've tried to choose immortality, but they can't, so now she needs to pass on this knowledge to the next generation, just like we as humans do. 90%. The final shootout, there was a great scene where she's sitting in the chair, and she just like you'd sit on your iPad, she's just flipping through all of time and space. And she's flipping like this through it, and she's in like the Eiffel Tower, Times Square, things like that. And when she arrives in Times Square, it's present day. She goes back a number of years, and it's just being built. And she goes back again, and it's the wilderness. And she goes back again, and it's like the beginning of time and the Big Bang, the dawn of creation. All this is happening in her mind in 1 second. And it begs the question, is she actually traveling through time? Or is her mind simply constructing, looking at the cells, looking at their sort of entropy? Is she actually just perceiving what happened? Is she able to just look back that way? Or is she actually traveling? Could she get up out of the chair and do something? I don't think so. But this all happens in a second as Chang arrives, and he's got the gun pointed at the back of her head. I thought it was great when she sees the original Lucy. So Lucy, meet Lucy. And she sees that very primitive human. And they kind of look at each other, and that was a great moment. So it goes back to what I was just saying. The proto-humanoid Lucy seems to perceive our Lucy. So is she present there, or is she just a figment in the monkey's imagination? I don't know. Plot hole, no. I think it's just open for interpretation. So as their fingers touch, it's almost like that divine spark in the painting on the Sistine Chapel, where sort of God comes down and touches with his finger, and it's that divine spark of life. That was a nice symbol there as well. So Chang's pointing the gun at the back of her head. She watches the birth of our own universe. 100%, she's gone. The detective kills Chang, and then Lucy produces a flash drive, and she says, "I'm everywhere." So she's everywhere in the universe now. Her consciousness exists. So maybe she was able to choose immortality after all. She's passed the knowledge down, and she was actually able to do both that and perhaps live forever as this form of consciousness. There are those who believe that we as humans, billions of years from now, will evolve into beings of pure energy. And of course, science fiction, Star Trek, things like that have touched on that many times. That's where our species is headed. Evolution, the evolution of humanity may someday leave the physical shell and exist in a plane of just thought and energy. And that's what happens to Lucy here. So, life was given to us 1 billion years ago. Now you know what to do with it. The answer is supposedly on that flash drive. I'd like to know what's on it, and I'm assuming that she built firmware into it that would allow it to be plugged into just a PC. That would be great. Let's be honest, it would probably be Mac only, wouldn't it? So, I thought that the Professor Norman lecture would run the whole film and they wouldn't meet up, but it was cool that they were actually able to meet. Morgan Freeman is in everything. The Christopher Nolan Batman trilogy, Red, Oblivion, he popped up, and he even popped up in the Lego movie as Vitruvius. So I always like to see him. Mr. Chang, I didn't realize until way too late he was a drug smuggler. And his character was good as well, but it reminded me of so many movies where the bad guys just don't know when to cut their losses and quit. I recently saw a great movie with Denzel Washington called The Equalizer. Really good action in that, which was, again, that in and of itself reminded me of Taken. This lone wolf who can take out with his particular set of skills, he can take out armies of the mob and these bad guys and these cartels. Real wish fulfillment, because wouldn't we like to have that sort of power to not be threatened by organizations like that? Pierre Del Rio, the cop, good reminder to Lucy about what it is to be human and her anchor as she continues to evolve. So he was a good character. I'd like to see a spin-off with just him as a cop. I thought he played the role very well, and he was likable. He was a likable character. So Lucy asks, life was given to us 1 billion years ago. What have we done with it? It reminds me of when Lilu in Fifth Element is looking through the computer and she's reading everything about human history start to finish, and she stops on war and her face with the horror as she looks at really what war is and what humans have done with life and with their planet. And she's weeping because of what we've done. So the movie itself, good action, interesting concepts. It's not one that I'd watch really again. I'm glad I didn't spend more on the Blu-ray for it. I just caught it on demand. And Not up to the level of Fifth Element. Fifth Element's a movie I'd watch again and again. It's one of my favorite movies. It's probably in my top 10. I probably should kind of revise that. But some good concepts. I think a weak execution for the story. Could have done a little better with just Lucy as a character. And recommended. I think it's good to watch once. It does bring up some interesting questions. And you know, it was enjoyable. I think a movie like Ultraviolet had better visuals and had, you know, I would say maybe even like a more interesting plot. But the plot of Lucy was simple. You know, it was enough to give them the impetus they needed to sort of drive these concepts and to explore them. So, all in all, well done. When you think of the giant technological strides that man has made in a few millennia, less than a microsecond in the chronology of the universe, can you imagine the evolutionary development that much older life forms have taken? They may have progressed from biological species, which are fragile shells for the mind at best, into immortal machine entities. And then, over innumerable eons, they could emerge from their chrysalis of matter, transformed into beings of pure energy and spirit. Their potentialities would be limitless, and their intelligence ungraspable by humans. It's a quote by Stanley Kubrick, and it's very appropriate to this film. I think that's what they were going for. It's an interesting concept. Scarlett's acting was okay. The movie as a whole, though, not worthy of a sequel. I don't think I would buy it. Lucy, I'll leave it to you. Let me know what you thought in the comments, and thank you very much.